Welcome to Perspective and Practice. I'm your host, Rachel Sadoff, and today we have with us Lindsay Tsai, Operating Manager for US Bank. How are you today, Lindsay?
I'm doing good, Rachel. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. So excited to have you here with us today. So, I'd love if we could just start with you sharing a little bit about your leadership origin story.
Sure, yeah. I guess I started out in banking when I was in Singapore for a year. I was working with my dad, and then when I came back, I needed a job, and I wasn't quite sure, what do I want to do? I didn't quite know at that time. I was pretty young. I think it was in my early 20s or so. I wasn't sure which career I wanted to go into. So I had some friends who had worked at a financial institution during college. So they said, well, why don't you do this in the meantime? So said, okay, let me join. So I joined credit card collections at entry level, and I really started my banking career there. After a couple of years in collections, I moved over to a quality assurance role, which kind of began my risk experience. It was a lateral move, and so it wasn't necessarily, more money, but it was just to gain experience in another area that I was interested in. So once I went into a quality assurance role, I kind of moved my way up through the ranks, um, team lead, entry level manager, and I was fortunate enough to keep moving through the managerial positions up to the position that I'm at today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, how did your early experiences kind of shape your approach to leadership that you have now?
Sure. I think that by starting at an entry level position within an operate and then moving over to an operations team, it helped me learn the different levels within an organization. Right. So I was customer facing to start with. I moved to the back office operations, going team lead, manager, and then the different levels of management. I think it gave me a different perspective, on what the expectations were at each level, what the needs were of myself and my team, so that I could better support my team as I kind of move through those different layers.
Yeah, that's great. Did you have any like pivotal moments in your career that kind of helped you develop your style and your mindset?
Yeah, I think that I can honestly say that every leader that I've had helped to shape the leader that I am today. Positive or negative leaders, I think, will always have an influence on you. And so I kind of took the pieces of each of my leaders that I admired, whether it was their speaking style, whether it was them being a subject matter expert, their communication, how they led meetings. I tried to just take pieces of each of those leaders and absorb them into my leadership style, right? So I think that there were a few pivotal moments, but every leader that I've had throughout the ranks has really helped me shape who I am today.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how you took such a positive approach because in my younger leadership days, I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. And I'm
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
not doing that.
And that
And I think
definitely
I
happened
focused
too,
more on the negative things that I didn't like that people did instead of focusing on the like really positive things that people did. I was just like,
Sure.
nope, that's not happening.
Yeah, they can both shape you, right? So I've had leaders that, maybe I wasn't a fan of some of the things that they did. Maybe they weren't quite as supportive as I would like, or they weren't as quite as communicative as I would have liked. So those things also, I think, influence who you are as a leader.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Were there any specific leaders in your life that stuck out more than others? And, what is it that they did that was different?
Yeah, so I think that the leaders that have really stuck out in my mind, there are two that I can think of. And one of them, he really cared about everybody on his team. He was somebody that would always check in. He knew when your birthday was, when your work anniversary was, even years after you didn't work for him anymore. So he was just a very caring leader who would always make sure to communicate consistently with his entire team, whether the team was 10 or 100. He was just very in touch with the different levels of his team. So I would say that he definitely influenced the way that I communicate with my team members. And then I also had one who was very, very good at being a subject matter expert for the department. Any question that you asked her about any aspect of the entire department, she would know. And so I think that that was really inspiring because you could see, somebody can kind of do it all, right? They can lead a team, but also understand what's going on in the ins and outs of a department.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. With so many of these interviews that we've been kind of just talking with people about, like, charismatic leadership, like empathy,
Hmm.
emotional intelligence, like just keeps coming up and up in terms of the leaders that people remember and the leaders that
Hmm.
have impacted people are always the ones that are, walking around on the floor with their head up, introducing, talking to people, cracking jokes, just
Yeah.
building relationships with people. I think sometimes people forget the importance of that.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with you because I think that the leaders that I remember are the ones that I've really connected with and have made an impact, whether it's my working career, in my personal life, inside, outside of work, those that have really showed that they care about me as a person, my development within the company. Those are the leaders that you really remember.
Yeah, yeah. John Maxwell always says, everyone communicates, few connect. And
Hmm.
that's always been a quote that has always just stuck with me as a leader because that's the way that I like to go out
Hmm.
and lead and connect with my team, but also just the way, kind of now I'm more in sales for my company because I'm drumming up business and stuff like that. But that's for me how I lead and connect, even just with clients is just, start with humanity first.
Yep. Yeah. And if you think about people that you want to be around, you want a leader that you want to be around, right? You want a leader that you can connect with, not somebody that feels like they're just going through the motions and they're meeting with you because they have to meet with you. But you want to work for somebody that genuinely cares about you as a person and cares about your development within the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in a previous conversation that we had, we
Mhm.
talked a lot about like 360 leadership, and you described yourself as a 360 leader. And so, can you share how building intentional relationships across the organization has helped you, establish influence and trust around the company?
Yeah, I think that building relationships as a leader and as a team member, whether you're in leadership or an individual contributor, but building that trust with your peers, with your partners, with your team, regardless of where they are in the organization, is extremely important. You need to establish trust with those that you work with. And the way that I've at least attempted to do that is that I make myself available at any time that anybody needs me. It doesn't matter what level of the organization, what they need, if they need a document, if they need a contact, if they need a PowerPoint presentation, anything that somebody needs, I was right there to help them. And I think that it turns into a mutually beneficial relationship. And the more relationships that you build where you're helping somebody else, they're able to help you. That's how you build your network within a company. And that's how you become a trusted business partner or leader within the company, within your department.
Yeah.
So it's really building those relationships with everybody that becomes very important as you're growing within a company.
Yes, no, I was just talking to somebody the other day about that and just kind of how he moved up in his organization and he kind of said the same thing by being helpful, by being
Yeah.
available to people,
Hmm.
by volunteering, like
Hmm.
being the first to volunteer when you
Yeah.
see a problem, to be part of the solution, and how people see it when you don't even realize other people are watching
Yeah.
just by being that proactive person and being a helper is such a huge part of leadership. So how did consistency, like responding to everyone and demonstrating reliability, contribute to your leadership success? Because I remember in our past conversation you were like, I respond to every email.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a long response, but I respond and acknowledge every email. So share with me a little bit more about that practice or theory that you have.
Sure. And I think that it's common these days for somebody to reach out via Teams, send an IM to ask for something. But I think that the important part of building that trust is treat everybody else, and this is kind of cliche, the way that you want to be treated. But when you think about it within a business setting, it's if you ask somebody for something, what would you expect or what would you hope for their
Yeah,
response to be, right? You want
yeah,
it to be quick, you want it to be accurate. You want to know that there's somebody that you can rely on. So I think look at what you would expect in others or what you would hope for in others that you're working with, and do convey those actions in yourself, right?
yeah,
So anytime anybody needs something, even if I'm busy, if I'm doing something else, I've become a great multitasker by helping everybody. when they need it and as quickly as possible, because a lot of times we're under strict time constraints. And usually if somebody reaches out, it's because they really need something, right? Whether they're on my team or on another team. People don't usually reach out because they can easily find an answer. They really need your help, right? So I think that it's making yourself available, like I talked about, building those relationships. And as that expands, you become more trusted in your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I always do is I just always ask people, like, what is the urgency of this? Like, do
Sure.
you need it
Yeah.
now? Can you get it in 3 days? Do you need it in a week, a month? Like, what is the
Right.
urgency? And that really helps me not only um make sure that I'm supporting them, but also make sure that I'm prioritizing the other deliverables or things that I have for other people.
Yeah.
And just kind of gives me that like important urgency to like make sure that I'm fulfilling it, but I'm also fulfilling other things that I need to do as well.
Yep. Yeah. And I think usually I tend to prioritize everybody else's needs ahead of maybe a project that I'm working on, because I know my time frames, right? I know when I need to get something done. So if somebody asks me for something, I try and get that done first, and then I can go back to whatever project I have as long as they're not too pressing.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about advancement. So every time
Yeah.
there's an opportunity for advancement, you applied for it. So
Yeah.
what motivated this approach and how did it shape your leadership growth?
Sure. I think that my belief in my influence over departments and teams and groups is what really has motivated me to apply for different positions as they become available. I truly believe that I can have a positive impact on the teams that I join. I enjoy being a part of new teams. I enjoy being a part of newly formulated teams or processes. And so I've been fortunate that the positions that I've applied for, they've generally been in new risk departments where there's been a new team building, a new process building, there's a need that might come from an outside regulator or outside need from a different department. So I think that for me, the opportunities that have come have really been in areas that I've been interested in, because I'm always interested in building a new team and seeing how I can influence that growth and helping out, build out the procedures, build out the processes, build out the new team members. You know, those are all things that are really exciting to me. So I've been fortunate that my career is sort of lined up with areas that we're newly building or in the process of revamping.
Yeah, new teams, man. Like people either love them or they hate them.
Yeah, yeah,
You have to go
I would
through
agree.
those stages of team development, like the
Mm-hmm.
formation stage, forming, and then you go through this like storming stage where you're like, who are you? Who am I? Like,
Yeah,
what's going on? And then you get to the
yeah.
storming stage where you're like, okay, maybe we can start working together, and then you actually get into that performing stage. And so like the stages can be challenging
Mm-hmm.
for leaders, especially like new leaders that are like, I don't know about this. But
Yeah.
then, going into longtime stagnant teams, has its own set of challenges. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, what are some things that you have learned or advice you can give to people when they're like working with these new teams? Because I know oftentimes those are the teams that you're working with are like brand new baby teams
Yeah.
that you're like putting together that have big initiatives. So
Yeah.
what do you care about that?
Yeah, I think that it's important to do your research as you're joining a new team, right? What are the expectations for this group? Why did they form? Why are they operating the way that they are? I think that I found with new teams formulating that there's usually a reason why they're forming, but maybe some of the details haven't been worked out yet. So it's up to you as a new team member coming into this team to figure out where can you really contribute to the growth of the department, or where can you contribute to the success? Because it's important to understand that with new teams, there's always going to be that rocky beginning where everybody's unsure, what are we supposed to be doing? But as a leader, and especially if you have a new team that's coming into it, it's up to you to figure those things out so that you can lead your team effectively. Ask lots of questions. Your leaders may be new to the department also, right? But you can work together to figure out the answer to those questions. And I think you just can't be afraid to try new things. In a newer group, then all of those kinks haven't been worked out yet, right? They're still going through growing pains. And any group's going to go through it for at least the first year, maybe 2 years that they're formulating. So it's important that you ask the right questions to the leaders for the why behind why the group is forming, why they're operating the way that they are. And then is there space for you to modify and to make more effective the team that you're building?
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever I have a new team and like I am a part of leadership or something like that, like I always tell my people, I don't know everything. Like
Right. Yep.
I
Yeah.
need
I
you to
say that all the time. Sure.
like it's gonna be a crash course. It's gonna be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the only one that's uncomfortable.
Yep.
We're
Yes.
we just got to be on the ride together and
Mm-hmm.
be willing to take that ride together and build those relationships where we can fail forward.
Yeah,
And
and I think that's a very important point that you made is doing it together, right? Your team needs to know that you're on the ride with them. If
yeah,
they're on late and they need to be working extra hours, then as a leader, I should also be there with them, right? To support them, to give them anything that they need, find the tools that they need to be successful. So I think that it is very much a together, a team mentality as you're going through the ups and downs of building out a new department. It's extremely important that your team knows that you're there to support them, not that you're just kind of watching them from above, telling them what to do, but that you're kind of in the weeds with them trying to figure it out.
yes, yes. There's nothing worse than a leader that's like watching chaos go and be like,
You
"Ooh,
figure it out. Yeah, right.
I'm good. I'll be over here."
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about like respecting and understanding the business. So you've
Yeah.
mentioned that respecting the business and proactively learning its layers was crucial to your success. How
Mm-hmm.
did you approach understanding different facets of the organization? Because it's so crucial that you're understanding those things as you continue to move up in leadership.
Yep. Yeah. And I think as we talked about with how I kind of came into the financial services industry and I started, at a very entry level position and moved my way through different departments that way, I just think that it gave me a different perspective, what frontline team members might need compared to, you know, beginning managers, frontline managers might need. And then as I think about what my leaders need from me, right? So I think that it's always important to keep in perspective the things that you've learned throughout your career. All of the years that you learn each position in each organization is just an opportunity to learn. Every organization is going to be unique and every role is going to be unique, but you can take pieces of each of those different organizations. What worked in one, what didn't work, what personalities did you see, how can you adjust? And I think that that's really important, is being adaptive to the different layers that you're working with as you're becoming a leader and as you're sort of working your way through different departments. And it's just so important to always be a sponge for learning and to always take into account all of those different experiences that you've had, to be a positive leader within your new group.
Yeah, yeah. I always love kind of Costco's philosophy of, everybody starts in the warehouse. You learn
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
foundation, and then you can move up through the ranks in the organization. Because unless you understand the worst job in the organization, you
Mm-hmm.
can't effectively make decisions for the entire organization.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree that it's a different perspective that you have. And so if you think about as an individual contributor, as somebody who hasn't gone through management or hasn't been a leader, they're going to have a completely different perspective. For somebody who's been a leader and a manager, the sorts of understands the other side where there's expectations from the company, from your department, you have performance metrics that you have to meet. That's a different perspective from an individual contributor. So I think that it's important to keep in mind those different roles that you've played a part in. I've been managing for about 10 years now, but it's not to say that I don't remember, before I was a manager and when I was an individual contributor, what did I look for in my leaders? What did I hope for? So right now I manage a team of individual contributors. What would I have wanted when I was an individual contributor? What would I have hoped for from my leader? And that's the type of leader that I try to be for my team.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, how did building relationships with leadership and cultivating sponsorships help advocate for your career?
Yeah, I think that we've talked a lot about relationship building, right? And being a trusted resource for everybody within an organization and building your network. And so I think that building that trust, and it takes time to build trust, but if you take every interaction that you have as an opportunity to build a relationship with those around you, including leaders, those that are peers to you, those who are maybe in higher positions, those that are individual contributors or play a different role within your department. I think that you have to take each of those interactions as an opportunity for them to get to know you, to get to trust your work. You go through so many different interactions in a day. If you think about how many meetings you have, there might be 50 people on a meeting, there might be 10 people on a meeting, but looking at each of those interactions as an opportunity for another team member to get to know who you are, as a worker, as a manager, as a leader, get to know your personality a little bit. It's really making sure that you form those connections. You don't always have to be the loudest one on a call, but make sure that when you say something, that it's something that everybody's going to pay attention to, right? They're going to want to hear what you have to say, because it's something that is applicable to the situation that you're in. Maybe you have something to contribute that wasn't thought of before. So I think it's being really intentional with your communication and intentional with the interactions that you have with everybody in your day-to-day work life.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you've done an incredible job of doing that and like inspiring people because your ability to inspire loyalty from your team members is remarkable, with many of them just following you as you've moved throughout different organizations
Sure.
and wanting to follow you as a leader. Like that's like a true test of leadership is when other people choicefully follow and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go over here now. And they're like,
Yeah.
we're gonna follow you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's such a great testament of that. So what do you think made like your leadership style resonate with other people so well?
Sure. I think that the largest compliment that I received as a leader is I had a leader once tell me, everybody wants to work for you. You have a great reputation in the company. And I think that that always stuck with me throughout any other accomplishments that I've had, because I think that your main job as a leader is to support your team, right? Everything else goes along with that support, but your main focus should always be on your team and how you can support them. And then the expectations for your team is going to sort of fall in line with the department expectations, with the company expectations, but it all comes back to how can you support your team? How can you advocate for your team? I My team will always know that I will advocate for them, right? If there's something that they need, if there's a resource that they need, if there's something to make their jobs easier, if they deserve a promotion, those types of things, I've always been an outspoken advocate for my team. And I think that's something that those that have worked for me will always say, is that I'm always working for them.
That's awesome. You know, team members having a sponsor supporting them without even just asking, hey,
Yeah.
will we build a mentor relationship or can we build a sponsor relationship together? Like that's like one type of relationship, but then when you have a leader that's out there actively like promoting you, talking about you, supporting you, without you even having to ask that, is such an incredible thing. Because a lot of leaders don't think about that.
Right.
They're focused on themselves and their
Mhm.
next move. They're not thinking about their team and their team's next move and their team as they're kind of moving up through the ranks.
Yeah, and it's really the success of your team is the only way that you can be successful as a leader, right? I'm not going to take credit for everything that my team does. I trust that I've given my team the tools that they need to be successful, and there are some that are very, very good at what they do, and it's not all because of me, right? They're just very, very good at what they do, but I make sure that I put them in the position to be successful. I give them the tools that I need, the connections they need. I try and make their jobs easier, and I really feel that that's my job as a leader, is to try to make their jobs easier.
Yeah. And I always let my team know, like, hey, y'all made me look good in that
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
y'all did
Yep.
this. And like, yeah. So I always, try to give them that recognition when
Hmm.
like their efforts has resulted in something that reflected in a meeting or, reflected in a margin or impacted the business or impacted whatever.
Yeah.
I always like try to give them those evaluations, those feedback that people are giving to the team, when they're not in those closed meetings of like, hey, Lindsay, like your team did awesome on this. Like the team isn't hearing that because they're not in that meeting, but just
Right.
being back on that because it's
Hmm.
hard for them to hear that.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that positivity is just so important to have your team feel like they're not only that they're doing a good job, but that they're seen, right? That they're heard, that everything that they're doing doesn't just stop at me. Everybody above me also knows what a great job that my team is doing. And of course, that reflects on you as a leader, but you can't be a strong leader without a strong team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, for aspiring leaders, what advice would you give about building influence and creating intentional relationships within the organization?
Sure. So I think that as we talked about, it's really that relationship building that's going to be extremely important as you're becoming a leader and figuring out who you are as a leader. You need to stay genuine to yourself, to your personality. Well, also, we've talked about taking pieces from those leaders that you admire to build those relationships. So it takes time, I think, to discover who you are as a leader, and it's constantly evolving. You're always adapting. You're always meeting somebody new. You're always influenced by somebody new that you can take, either positive or negative interactions from. So I think having that adaptability is extremely important as you're moving because every team, every department, every company that you're with is going to have different needs and different expectations for that role. So it's very important as you're designing your own leadership style that you're adaptable to the needs of the group around you and especially to your team. There's different needs, different personalities within your team. And it's just so important that you're able to adapt to what they need at that time to become successful.
Yeah. Yeah. How can leaders balance supporting their team with aligning their work to the company's broader goals?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that in any strong company, the goals of the team, so you're going to have your individual goals, you're going to have your team goals, your department goals, and then the company goals as a whole. And those should all align, right? In any strong company. And so that's the
They
hope. And
let
it,
the people in the back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it always goes back to supporting your team, as we talked about. That is your main function as a leader is to provide them that support. And everything sort of comes along with that. You're by supporting your team, you're going to be supporting your departmental goals, your own goals as a leader that are drawn out for you, the things that you need to accomplish within your role. It's always going to relate back to supporting your team. So by doing that, by making sure that your team is successful, that you're giving them the support that they need, that's going to accomplish your goals as a leader. It's going to accomplish the goals of the department. What is your department working towards? And then the goals of the company also, because you have to trust that your leaders are aligning those goals together, that whatever they're laying forward for you is also going to align with what the company is looking for. So I think that it really starts at the bottom layer where you're supporting your team members, and then it works up through the company from there. But as long as you're doing your job to make your team successful, it's going to align with everything else within the company.
Ah, no, for sure, for sure. So many times I've seen organizations where people don't understand how their role impacts any part of the organization.
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
there. And I think that's where leadership can really fail, is where where everybody and every team and every department within an organization needs to understand, where are we going?
Mm-hmm.
How
Right.
is my team or my personal efforts impacting how we're getting there? And
Right. Yeah.
if people can't articulate that, then you have a serious problem within your organization.
Yeah. I think it's important to kind of loop back and let them know why the job that they're doing is important. Like, hey, remember when you found this? It impacted X amount of customers. We were able to remediate, we were able to fix the problems for them, so kind of closing that loop on what it is that they're doing and how it impacts the department and how it impacts the company and ultimately our customers. I think that it becomes really rewarding for the team when they hear, hey, I helped 100 customers or I helped 1,000 customers, right? So kind of closing that loop and making sure that you're communicating with them the impact that the work that they're doing is having on everybody else, I think is really important for them to feel fulfilled within their positions.
Absolutely. What lessons have you learned about leadership that you think are the most important for people to know?
I think as we've discussed being genuine to who you are as a person, not trying to be exactly like this leader over there, or this leader, right? It's very important that you find what works for you, because what works for somebody else as a leader isn't going to work for you. It might be outside of your comfort zone. You might not be comfortable speaking in front of large groups, or you might be more comfortable in small groups. So then you can sort of modify your schedules that you meet with smaller groups rather than larger ones. So I think that a lot of it comes down to what are you comfortable with as a leader, and how can you stay genuine to your team and who you are? Because if you're disingenuine, then people are going to know, right? You can tell when somebody truly cares about what you're saying, they truly have a belief in the job that they're doing. And so I think find roles that appeal to you, to what's important to you as a team member, right? As a leader, what's important to you? Are you interested in customer service? Are you interested in risk? Are you interested in back office operations? Find a department that you can feel passionate about, because you're really going to do a better job and be able to service your team better if you find something that you really care about within a company.
Yes. No, awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for sharing your journey and your leadership insights. It's been a pleasure hearing about your experiences and the lessons you've learned along the way. And for our viewers, if you enjoyed hearing Lindsay's insights today, don't miss other Break the Norm leadership interviews. And if your organization is interested in learning more about Break the Norm leadership, and how we can help you develop your greatest assets, your people, click the link below. Thanks so much, Lindsay.
Thank you, Rachel.